From above, Cairo looks like every other impossible megacity. 20 million people crammed onto both banks of the Nile. Concrete towers stretching to the horizon. Highways choked with traffic that never stops moving, not even at midnight. From up here, the city looks like a living organism, sprawling, pulsing, relentless. But look closer. In the eastern quarter of the city, where the Muqattam Hills rise like a pale wall of limestone, something strange begins to emerge. Among the gray concrete and the glass and steel, there is a zone where the architecture changes entirely. The buildings become smaller. The domes of ancient mausoleums rise between the satellite dishes, and the streets, if you can call them that, become narrow, winding corridors between walls of carved stone and iron gates. This is Al-Qarafa, the city of the dead, an ancient necropolis stretching for 6 kilometers along the base of the Muqattam Hills. It has served as Cairo's primary burial ground for over 1,000 years. Caliphs were buried here. Sultans and saints were laid to rest in enormous, ornately decorated mausoleums that took generations to build. It is one of the most historically significant cemeteries in the entire world. And right now, at this very moment, over 500,000 people are waking up, making breakfast, sending their children to school, and going to work, all inside it. Before we go any further, let us sit with that fact for a moment. A cemetery, a graveyard, the place that every culture on Earth reserves exclusively for the dead. And in this one, more people are living than in the entire city of Seattle. More people than in all of Atlanta. More people than in Zurich, Oslo, and Copenhagen combined. Cairo is one of the fastest-growing cities in the world. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people arrive from the rural countryside of Egypt, fleeing poverty and drought, looking for work in the capital. And every year, the city's already catastrophic housing shortage grows worse. Rents in even the most basic neighborhoods have tripled in the last decade. New apartment buildings go up, but not nearly fast enough to absorb the wave of arrivals. So people find other solutions. They build on rooftops. They subdivide apartments into ever smaller units until a family of 6 lives in a space barely large enough for one. And some of them, those who arrived first or those who knew someone, they found another option. They found the city of the dead. They found that the tomb chambers were empty, and the courtyards were walled, and the space was free. And they moved in. To understand why 1 million people are living in a graveyard, you first have to understand the graveyard itself. Al-Qarafa is not a tidy modern cemetery with neat rows of identical headstones. It is more like a small city built specifically for the dead. And it was designed that way from the very beginning. When wealthy Mamluk sultans built their burial complexes, here in the 14th and 15th centuries, they did not simply build a grave. They built full compounds. There was the tomb chamber for the body, yes, but there was also a mosque for prayers, living quarters for caretakers, storage rooms for food, and an open courtyard for gatherings. These were not just graves. They were miniature palaces built for the afterlife. Those living quarters for caretakers were the key. For centuries, it was customary for wealthy Cairo families to employ a full-time guardian to watch over the family tomb, to keep it clean, to receive visitors on the anniversary of a death, to ensure the structure was maintained. These guardians lived on site. They raised their families inside the tomb compounds. And so, for hundreds of years before the modern housing crisis, there was already a living, breathing community thriving inside Al-Qarafa. The trickle became a flood in the 1940s. As Egypt's Industrial Revolution and the Second World War disrupted rural life, hundreds of thousands of Egyptians began migrating to Cairo in search of work. The city had no capacity to absorb them all. The informal settlements of Cairo, what Egyptians call the Ashwayat, began to grow at a staggering pace. For the very poorest of the arrivals, Al-Qarafa offered something Cairo could not: free space. The old tomb compounds, with their courtyards and rooms, were already walled and sheltered. Nobody was checking permits. Nobody was collecting rent. The tombs of long-forgotten merchants and minor officials stood empty and unlocked. And quietly, without announcement, people began to move in. By the 1950s, the population inside the cemetery had grown into the tens of thousands. By the 1970s, the Egyptian government finally acknowledged what was happening and began to extend basic services: electricity, water, sanitation, into the necropolis. Not because they approved of people living there, but because the alternative, hundreds of thousands of people living without any services at all, was a public health catastrophe they could not afford to ignore. When you first enter Al-Qarafa, the transition is so abrupt it genuinely stops you in your tracks. One moment you are on a Cairo street, all diesel fumes, honking horns, and the constant motion of a city that never stops. The next moment, you step through a narrow gate in an old stone wall, and the noise drops to half. The buildings shrink to one story. The pavement gives way to uneven stone and packed earth. The first thing you notice is not the tombs. It is how normal it feels. Children are kicking a football against a mausoleum wall. An old man sits on a plastic chair outside his front door, which happens to be the iron gate of a Mamluk-era tomb, drinking tea and watching the world go by. A woman calls from an upper window to her daughter in the courtyard below. A small shop sells cold drinks and phone credit from a converted tomb chamber. It is only when you look more carefully that the details begin to accumulate. The building your neighbor is leaning against has Arabic calligraphy carved into its stone face. But it is not a decoration. It is the name of the person buried inside. The courtyard where children are playing has a raised rectangular platform at its center: the grave. The clotheslines run from the ornate stone screen of a 600-year-old mausoleum to a rough concrete wall built sometime in the last decade. Life in the city of the dead follows the rhythms of any dense urban neighborhood. The day begins before sunrise with the call to prayer from the mosques. And there are several mosques inside Al-Qarafa, some of them occupying the same prayer halls that sultans once built for their own eternal souls. By 6 in the morning, the narrow alleys are already busy. Women prepare breakfast: tea, flatbread, foul mudamas, the slow-cooked fava bean stew that forms the backbone of the Egyptian working-class diet. Men prepare for work. Most residents of Al-Qarafa do not work inside the cemetery. They are laborers, street vendors, craftsmen, mechanics, cleaners. They work all over the city and return each evening to the narrow lanes of the Necropolis. The children get ready for school. This is perhaps the most startling normalcy. Al-Qarafa has schools inside it, not adjacent to it. Inside it, among the tombs. A primary school operates in a building that was originally a caretaker's house for a 14th century sultan's tomb. The children who attend it live on either side of the same alleyway, some of them in homes where, if you push aside the carpet in the back room, you will find a stone slab inscribed with a name and a date. Food in Al-Qarafa comes from the same sources as everywhere else in Cairo, the daily market. Every morning, vendors push carts loaded with vegetables, fruit, and bread through the alleyways of the Necropolis. The economy of the City of the Dead is not sealed off from the rest of Cairo. It is deeply integrated into it. Money flows in from the outside, and food flows in with it. But there is a local twist. Some of the most reliable residents of Al-Qarafa are the tomb caretakers. Families who have held the same position for 2, 3, sometimes 4 generations. Their arrangement with the wealthy families who own the tombs often includes food. On significant Islamic dates, the anniversary of a death, the Prophet's birthday, Eid, the owning families will arrive in their cars to pay their respects. And they bring food, enormous quantities of it, cooked meats, rice, bread. By tradition, what the caretaker family cannot eat must be shared with the neighbors. And so, on these days, the entire neighborhood eats well. It is an ancient system of patronage, running in parallel with the modern cash economy. And it is one of the reasons that Al-Qarafa, despite its extreme poverty, has always maintained a certain social cohesion. Everyone knows who the caretakers are. Everyone understands the obligations. And everyone benefits from the occasional feast that rolls in from the wealthy side of Cairo. The most common profession among the long-term residents of Al-Qarafa is one that exists nowhere else in Cairo. Professional mourner and tomb guardian. It sounds archaic, and it is in a sense, but the role is entirely real and economically essential. Wealthy Egyptian families who own private mausoleums in the Necropolis pay monthly stipends to caretaker families to maintain their properties. The duties are specific. Keep the tomb clean. Receive family visitors when they come to pray. Light incense on religious occasions. Ensure that no one breaks in or vandalizes the structure. In exchange, the caretaker family lives rent-free in the compound and receives a small monthly payment. For families at the very bottom of Cairo's economic ladder, this arrangement represents genuine security. Not wealth, but the basic stability of knowing where you will sleep tonight and who will pay for your children's school books. But tomb guardianship is only part of the story. Al-Qarafa has its own informal economy. There are marble cutters whose workshops occupy old tomb chambers, fitting, given that their entire business is making grave markers. There are mechanics, carpenters, and metal workers who have set up small workshops in the alleyways. There are women who take in laundry from the wealthier parts of Cairo and return it ironed and folded. The community is poor, but it is not idle. Growing up in the City of the Dead gives children a relationship with mortality that children in other places simply do not have. Death is not a concept here, hidden away in hospitals and whispered about. It is a physical reality, part of the architecture, inscribed on the walls, present in the raised platforms inside the rooms where they sleep. And yet, the children of Al-Qarafa are not morbid. They are children. They play football. They chase each other through the alleyways. They peer over walls at strangers with curious, unself-conscious eyes. When asked about the tombs, they shrug. It is their normal. They have never known anything else. The grave in the corner of the courtyard is simply furniture, unremarkable, like a tree in a garden. What the children do carry, however, is a sharp awareness of social difference. They know that the city outside the cemetery walls is different from their world. Some of them have never been more than a few streets beyond Al-Qarafa. Others have fathers who work all across Cairo and come home with stories of air-conditioned offices and shopping malls. The children absorb this information. They dream of a future outside the gates. But many of them, when they grow up, will find themselves back inside, because the city outside the gates offers no space for them either. The single most astonishing fact about Al-Qarafa is not that people live there. It is that the Egyptian government has, over the decades, quietly plugged the city of the dead into the national infrastructure grid. The Necropolis has electricity. It has running water. It has a sewage system. It has a post office. It has its own bus route that connects it to the rest of Cairo. This infrastructure did not arrive easily or quickly. It came in stages over decades in response to pressure from residents and, more practically, in response to the simple reality that a settlement of 500,000 people cannot be ignored indefinitely. The government never officially approved people living in the cemetery. That would require acknowledging a planning failure of historic proportions. But it could not leave 500,000 people without clean water. The result is a deeply strange administrative reality. The residents of Al-Qarafa pay utility bills, their addresses, the ones on their national ID cards, list tomb numbers and alleyway names. They receive mail. They are counted in the census. They are, in every bureaucratic sense, residents of Cairo. And yet the land they live on is technically owned by religious foundations and private families. And their right to remain is never officially confirmed and never officially revoked. They exist in a permanent legal gray zone, tolerated but never fully accepted. In a city where summer temperatures regularly hit 45 degrees Celsius in the shade, the physical structure of Al-Qarafa turns out to have an unexpected advantage. The ancient mausoleums are built from thick limestone, sometimes a meter thick or more. Stone does not heat up the way concrete does. The tomb chambers stay noticeably cooler than the surrounding city during the brutal summer months. Residents of Al-Qarafa know exactly where the shade falls at each hour of the day. They arrange their daily movements around it, sitting on the shaded side of alleyways in the morning, retreating into the thick-walled tomb chambers during the hottest part of the afternoon. In this way, the medieval architects who built these structures to honor the dead inadvertently provided the living with one of the most effective forms of passive cooling available in one of the hottest cities on Earth. But winter brings its own challenge. When the cold desert nights drop below 10 degrees Celsius, the same thick stone walls that kept the heat out now trap the cold inside. The tomb chambers become frigid. There is no central heating. Families burn gas canisters and wrap themselves in layers of blankets, sleeping together for warmth. The children who play so freely in the alleyways in the warm months are kept inside, pressed against a small heater, doing their schoolwork by the light of a single bulb. If you expected the city of the dead to be a place stuck in time, a medieval holdover untouched by the 21st century, you would be wrong. The satellite dish, perched on top of the ancient Mamluk mausoleum, is not a contradiction. It is the entire point. The people of Al-Qarafa are not trying to live in the past. They are trying to survive in the present, using whatever tools are available. Smartphones are everywhere. Young men sit on the steps of thousand-year-old tombs, watching football on their phones, arguing about whether Egypt's national team has any chance in the next African Cup of Nations. Women video call relatives in other parts of Cairo, holding the phone up to show a child taking their first steps across a courtyard that has been paved over a grave. The apps on their phones are the same apps as anywhere else in the world. The prayers they read are the same prayers. The music they play is the same music. And yet, the paradox is always present. When a delivery driver enters Al-Qarafa to bring a food order, he navigates not by street addresses, but by tomb landmarks. Turn left at the Green Mausoleum. It is the third alleyway after the tomb of the old merchant family. The ancient and the modern are not in conflict here. They have simply merged into something entirely new. Something that exists nowhere else in the world. In Cairo's crowded apartment blocks, neighbors often do not know each other's names. The city moves too fast, and the walls between apartments are too thick, and everyone is too exhausted from the commute to make time for the person on the other side of the door. Al-Qarafa is different. In the city of the dead, everybody knows everybody. The alleyways are too narrow and too interconnected for anonymity. You cannot walk from your door to the main gate without passing 6 neighbors, and each of those neighbors will greet you and expect a response. The social norms are strict. You know who is sick, who is having trouble paying their bills, whose daughter just got engaged, whose son is failing at school. This information is not gossip. It is the social infrastructure of the community, the way that needs are identified and, when possible, met. When a family in Al-Qarafa falls into crisis, when the breadwinner loses a job, when a medical emergency swallows a month's income, the community responds with a directness and speed that formal social services cannot match. Neighbors arrive with food. Money is lent without paperwork. Children are taken in and fed and cared for. It is a system born from shared vulnerability, and it works with a precision that the rest of Cairo, for all its modernity, cannot replicate. The most persistent daily problem in Al-Qarafa is what the residents call the water situation. Although the Necropolis is connected to Cairo's water supply, the pressure is low and unreliable. During peak hours, in the morning and evening, water trickles rather than flows. Families store it in plastic barrels and large clay pots, the same vessels their grandparents used, and ration it carefully throughout the day. The drainage is a chronic crisis. The alleyways of Al-Qarafa were not designed to handle the waste of a living community. The ancient stone channels were built for rainwater, and it rarely rains in Cairo. When the informal sewage system backs up, the alleyways flood with gray water, and children must navigate around pools of standing water to get to school. The city's maintenance crews come rarely and incompletely. And above everything else, there is the permanent anxiety of eviction. Every few years, a new Cairo governor announces a plan to restore the historic cemetery, to remove the residents, demolish the informal additions, and transform Al-Qarafa into a tourist attraction worthy of its UNESCO World Heritage status. These announcements send a wave of dread through the community. Families with no other options begin to quietly ask the same question. If they are pushed out of the tombs, where exactly are they supposed to go? As the afternoon heat finally breaks, Al-Qarafa comes alive in a different way. The working men begin to return, filtering through the main gates in ones and twos, still in their dusty work clothes, calling greetings to the neighbors sitting outside their doors. The smells of cooking, garlic, cumin, onions frying in oil, drift out of the tomb chambers where women are preparing dinner. After the evening prayer, the community gathers the way it has gathered in this place for centuries. Men sit outside in the cooling air, drinking tea and talking. Women gather on the steps of the larger mausoleums, their voices rising and falling in conversation. Children are called in for dinner, one by one, their protests brief and theatrical. The alleyways empty gradually, like water draining from a pool. By 10 o'clock, Al-Qarafa is quiet. The lights in the tomb windows glow yellow through the carved stone screens that were designed to let light and air into the burial chambers. The cats, there are always cats, dozens of them, take possession of the alleyways. And the ancient mausoleums stand in the moonlight exactly as they have stood for 500 years. Stone and silence, and, behind the stone, the soft sounds of 1 million people breathing. Ask the residents of Al-Qarafa what they are most proud of, and the answer surprises you. It is not the age of the place. Although the 1,000-year-old stones give them a certain gravitas, it is not the community bonds, although they will mention those too. What they are most fiercely proud of is this: they have never been a burden. They pay for what they use. They maintain what they inhabit. They have taken something abandoned and made it live. The caretaker families, in particular, hold this pride with extraordinary intensity. They will show you the mausoleums they maintain. Polished floors, freshly repainted walls, incense burned on the correct religious dates, and point out that without them, without their families living here and watching over these structures, the entire necropolis would long ago have crumbled into rubble and dust. They are not squatters. They are custodians. And there is something true in this claim. The parts of Al-Qarafa where no one lives, where the informal settlement has not taken hold, are genuinely in worse condition. Tombs that have no guardians have been looted. Their carved stone screens have been broken and stolen. Their marble has been stripped away. The living, for all the disorder they bring, have also brought something the dead cannot provide for themselves: protection. The phrase, "City of the Dead," does most of the work before you even arrive. It conjures images of a desperate, haunted slum, a place of misery and morbid horror, where the desperate poor cling to existence among the bones of the dead. This is the picture that newspaper articles paint, that documentary makers too often reproduce, that tourists who venture near the edges of Al-Qarafa believe before they step inside. The reality is more complex and, in its own way, more interesting. Al-Qarafa is poor, genuinely, seriously poor, with all the health risks and educational deprivation and daily stress that poverty brings. But it is not a place of despair. The people who live here are not waiting to be rescued. They are not broken by their circumstances. They have built something. A community, a culture, a way of life. And they are attached to it with the same fierceness with which people everywhere are attached to their homes. The other misunderstanding is about the relationship between the living and the dead. Outside observers tend to find this relationship disturbing. The idea of sleeping next to graves, of children playing on tombstones. But for the residents of Al-Qarafa, who are almost uniformly Muslim, the relationship is not disturbing at all. In Islamic tradition, the dead are nearby, not gone. Prayer for the dead is a daily act. Visiting graves is a form of respect, not a source of fear. Living in the company of the dead is, for them, simply living in the company of memory. Ahmed has lived in the same tomb compound for 62 years. She was born here, married here, raised 4 children here, buried her husband here, in the mosque attached to the compound, not in the main chamber, where the original family of the tomb remains undisturbed. She is 78 years old, and she has no intention of leaving. She has been offered the chance to leave twice. Government relocation programs have come through Al-Qarafa with promises of apartments in new housing developments on the outer edges of Cairo. She declined both times. The apartments, she explains, were on the 14th floor. She has never lived on a 14th floor. She does not know how. Her entire life is built around this courtyard, these alleyways, these neighbors. An apartment on the 14th floor of a concrete tower, 60 kilometers from the city center, is not a solution. It is another kind of displacement. What keeps her here, she says, is simple. I know every stone. It is not a metaphor. She knows the name of every family buried in the compounds on her alleyway. She knows which graves are visited regularly and which have been forgotten. She knows, she says quietly, that she will be buried here too, and that her children will look after her tomb the way she looked after her husband's. In the city of the dead, continuity is not an abstraction. It is a physical fact, laid out in the stones at your feet. Hassan left Al-Qarafa at 19 to work in Saudi Arabia. Construction, mostly. The kind of hard, anonymous work that sends millions of Egyptian men abroad every year to build someone else's skyline while their own city struggles. He stayed for 11 years. He sent money home. He saved. He married a woman from his neighborhood by proxy and met her properly only on a video call for the first 3 years. When he came back, he had enough money for a deposit on an apartment in one of Cairo's new satellite cities. Those vast, planned developments on the desert edge, where the government has been trying to relocate the working class for 30 years. He looked at the apartment. He sat in it. He looked at the window, which faced another window 4 meters away. He thought about his mother in the tomb compound, about the alleyway where he had grown up, about the neighbors whose names he still knew, even after 11 years abroad. He moved back into Al-Qarafa, not into his mother's compound. He rented a space in a nearby mausoleum and rebuilt it properly with insulation and tiling and a real kitchen. His wife, when she finally arrived from the Delta to join him, was initially horrified. Within 6 months, she says, she understood. The neighbors brought food every day for a week when our first son was born. she says. Who does that in a satellite city? Who even knows your name? Al-Qarafa is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. On paper. The reality on the ground is that several of the most historically significant structures in the necropolis are crumbling at a rate that alarms archaeologists and historians. The Northern Cemetery, home to some of the greatest examples of Mamluk funerary architecture in the world, has lost carved stone panels to theft and pollution that can never be replaced. Part of the problem is Cairo's notorious air pollution, a toxic mixture of car exhaust, industrial emissions, and desert dust that eats into limestone with a speed that medieval stonecutters could never have anticipated. Part of the problem is the informal modifications made by residents over the years. Walls knocked through, plumbing forced through ancient masonry, satellite dishes bolted into carved facades. And part of the problem is simply neglect. The Egyptian government has neither the money nor the political will to prioritize restoring old tombs in a city where the living are struggling. What is disappearing, too, is the oral history. The specific knowledge held by the oldest caretaker families about which sultan lies in which chamber, which story is told about which inscription, what the old names were for the alleyways that now go by numbers. As the original caretaker families age and die, and their children move into different professions, this knowledge is simply going with them. The stones remain, but the stories that animate them are vanishing, one elder at a time. For the young people of Al-Qarafa, the dilemma is as old as poverty and as new as social media. They grow up seeing two worlds simultaneously: the cramped, improvised life of the necropolis and, on their phones, the filtered, aspirational life of everyone else. The gap between the two is both measurable and infinite. University is theoretically available to them. Egypt's public universities are nominally free, but the informal costs, the textbooks and the transport, and the lost income of years not working, make a degree a luxury that only some families in Al-Qarafa can absorb. Those who do get out, who graduate, who find professional work, who move to apartments, are celebrated like returning heroes. They are proof that escape is possible, but for every one who escapes, there are 5 who do not, who finish school and find no jobs waiting. Because the formal economy of Cairo is a narrow gate with a very long queue. Who stay in the necropolis, drift into the informal labor market, get married, have children, and find themselves, at 35, living exactly the same life as their parents. Not through failure of will or intelligence, but because the city outside the gates has not made a space for them. The dilemma, ultimately, is this: is staying here a choice, or is it simply the absence of other choices? Twice a year, the city of the dead becomes something extraordinary. During the Maulid, the birthday celebrations of the saints whose tombs are in Al-Qarafa, the necropolis is transformed. Hundreds of thousands of people flood in from all across Cairo, from the Delta, from Upper Egypt. Food stalls appear in every alleyway. Sufi musicians set up in the courtyards of the great mausoleums and play through the night the hypnotic, cyclical rhythms of the dhikr, filling the air until dawn. For the residents, these celebrations are their finest hours. For one extraordinary week, the necropolis stops being invisible. The city comes to them. The streets they navigate every day are filled with pilgrims who have traveled hours to stand in the same spot. The mausoleums that are their neighbors become centers of spiritual pilgrimage. And the residents, the people who live here, who know every alleyway, who maintain the tombs, become hosts, guides, and the living custodians of something that the rest of Cairo, for this brief window, recognizes as sacred. These celebrations are also quietly acts of political claim. A community that gathers and worships and celebrates in public is a community that exists, that cannot be relocated or erased without consequence. Every maulid that fills the alleyways of Al-Qarafa is an assertion. We are here, we have always been here, and we are not leaving. There is 1 hour in Al-Qarafa when the city is completely still. It comes just before the first call to prayer, when the last cats have retreated from the alleyways, and the first light has not yet reached the floor of the narrow lanes. The ancient tombs are dark shapes against a sky that is just beginning to soften at the edges. There is no traffic noise from the city outside, not because the city has stopped, but because the thick limestone walls absorb it. In this brief window, Al-Qarafa reveals what it was built to be, a place of peace. The carved stone screens filter the pale light into intricate patterns on the ground. The inscriptions on the tomb facades are legible again, not obscured by the business of the day. The names of the dead, merchants, scholars, soldiers, saints, hang in the quiet air. And the sleeping city of the living pressed up against them seems, for this moment, to be resting inside something much larger and much older than itself. It is in this hour, the residents say, that they understand why they stay. Not the economics, not the community, not the inertia of lifetimes built here. Something else. The feeling of being rooted in a place so deep in history that your own life, its anxieties, its disappointments, its small victories, finds its proper proportion. You are a brief warmth inside a very long story, and there is, strangely, a comfort in that. The city of the dead teaches a lesson that Cairo's glass towers cannot. It teaches you what you actually need. When you live in a space measured in square meters rather than square kilometers. When your possessions must fit in 2 rooms shared between 6 people. When the walls of your home are the walls of an 800-year-old tomb. You learn, with extraordinary speed and clarity, what is essential and what is not. The residents of Al-Qarafa own less than almost anyone else in Cairo. They have few appliances, little furniture, minimal wardrobes. What they have in abundance is time. Time spent in the alleyways with neighbors. Time spent in the courtyards with children. Time spent in long meals eaten slowly on the floor. The pace of life inside the necropolis is genuinely slower than the pace of life in the city around it. Partly from necessity, partly from infrastructure. It is hard to move fast in an alleyway 3 feet wide. And partly, perhaps, from something absorbed, from the stones themselves. The oldest residents will tell you, if you ask, that the dead are good company. Not in a mystical sense, though some of them believe that too, but in a practical one. The tombs are a constant reminder of the only thing that is certain. And that reminder, lived with every day rather than avoided, tends to produce a certain quality of attention, a sharpness to the small pleasures, a patience with the daily frustrations, a capacity to sit quietly with the fact of mortality rather than running from it until it catches you. Why do people stay in a place like this? It is the question we started with, and we have circled around it through the economics and the history and the community bonds and the legal gray zones. But the truest answer, the one that sits underneath all the practical explanations, is simply this: because it is home. Home is not a set of conditions. It is not a certain square footage, or a view, or an absence of graves in the courtyard. Home is the specific accumulation of one life spent in one place. The knowledge of which neighbor to go to when something breaks. The shortcut to the alleyway that saves 3 minutes every morning. The sound of the particular muezzin at the particular mosque you have been hearing since childhood. These things cannot be replicated in a government housing block 60 kilometers away. They are not transferable. And there is something else. In a city as rootless as Cairo, where millions of people are first or second generation migrants from somewhere else, where the pace of construction and demolition means that the city your parents knew barely resembles the city you inhabit. Al-Qarafa offers a continuity that is almost nowhere else available. The families who have been here for 4 generations are not just residents of a neighborhood. They are the living custodians of 1,000 years of history. That is not something you walk away from easily. The price of life in Al-Qarafa is paid in specific, grinding ways. It is paid in the health costs of inadequate sanitation and poor air quality. Respiratory illness is endemic in the Necropolis, and the children suffer most. It is paid in the educational costs of overcrowded schools and families that need children to work rather than study. It is paid in the psychological cost of the permanent legal insecurity. The knowledge that at any moment, an eviction notice could arrive that there is no legal mechanism to challenge. It is paid, too, in the invisible costs of stigma. People who give their address as Al-Qarafa face a very specific kind of social judgment in Cairo. Job applications are quietly set aside. Landlords in other neighborhoods will not rent to them. There is a word in Cairo, one that the residents of Al-Qarafa know well. That means the cemetery people. It is not said kindly. But the people who live here have made their calculation, and they have made it clearly. The community they have is real. The cost of finding housing elsewhere, the rents, the deposits, the loss of the social network that is their safety net, is prohibitive. And the alternative that the government offers, those apartments on the 14th floor of a block in the desert periphery, is not an upgrade. It is a different kind of poverty, one with better walls, but without the one thing that makes poverty survivable: the people who know your name. Cairo's middle and upper classes have a complicated relationship with Al-Qarafa. For most of them, it is simply not a place they think about. It exists in a mental blind spot, too close to ignore entirely, but too uncomfortable to examine directly. When the subject comes up, the standard response is a kind of helpless sympathy. Yes, it is terrible. Someone should do something. What that something should be is never quite specified. The government's relationship with Al-Qarafa is more active and more fraught. Every few years, a new initiative emerges. A restoration project for the historic structures, a relocation program for the residents, a development scheme that promises to transform the Necropolis into a heritage district complete with walkways and museums and cafes. These initiatives are announced with great fanfare and then quietly abandoned when the political will falters, or the money runs out, or the residents resist. And then there are the researchers, the architects, the urban planners, the documentarians, the outsiders who come to Al-Qarafa to look, to measure, to film, to analyze. The residents have a guarded relationship with this class of visitor. They have been studied and photographed and written about for decades, and their material circumstances have not improved as a result of the attention. They are, by now, expert at providing the answers that researchers want, while keeping the actual texture of their lives private. They are generous to visitors, as Egyptians always are. But they are not naive. There are genuine reasons for cautious hope. A new generation of Egyptian architects and urban planners has begun to argue, quietly but persistently, for a different approach to Al-Qarafa. One that starts from the reality of the community rather than from a blueprint of what the neighborhood should look like. Instead of eviction and replacement, they argue for upgrade, investment in sanitation, structural reinforcement of the historic buildings, formal legal recognition of the residents' right to remain. Some community-led initiatives are already underway. A group of young residents has established a cultural organization that offers after-school tutoring, art classes, and crucially, digital literacy training for older residents. A local architect has been working without pay on a project to catalog the historic structures inside Al-Qarafa and identify which ones are at greatest risk of collapse. These are small things, but they are real, and they are being done by the people who actually live here, which means they have a chance of actually lasting. The future of Al-Qarafa will be decided, ultimately, by the future of Cairo itself. If the city's housing crisis eases, if enough affordable, genuinely livable housing is built to give the residents real alternatives, some of them will leave, but even then, some will stay. Because after 1,000 years, the city of the dead is not simply a last resort. It is, for the people who have made it their home, a place worth staying in. Al-Qarafa forces a rethinking of the categories we use to understand urban life. What counts as a home? What counts as a community? What does heritage mean when the heritage site is also a living neighborhood? These are not abstract questions. They are questions that 1 million people in Cairo are living every day, whether the rest of the world chooses to look or not. What the city of the dead ultimately reveals is the human capacity to domesticate anything, any space, no matter how it was originally intended, how it was built, for whom, for what purpose, can become home if people need it enough and stay long enough and love it enough. The dead of Al-Qarafa were laid to rest here, expecting peace and silence and reverence. They got instead the school bells and the cooking smells and the football games and the arguments and the laughter of the living. They got, in the end, exactly what the living always bring, the proof that life continues. There is something in this that goes beyond the specific situation of Al-Qarafa. Something that speaks to the broader human experience of making do, of finding space in the margins, of building community in the places that society has forgotten. The people of the city of the dead did not choose their circumstances, but they have shaped them into something extraordinary. And they have done it with a dignity and a warmth that puts to shame the city that continues to pretend they do not exist. Just before nightfall, an old woman stands in the doorway of a tomb compound, watching the last of the day's light fade from the carved inscription above the gate. The inscription is the name of a man who died in the year 1342. She does not know his name. She has never needed to. She has lived beside this gate for 40 years, and the inscriptions has simply become part of the grain of her world. Inside the compound, a lamp comes on in the back room. A child's voice rises. A question, a demand, a complaint, and an adult voice answers with the particular tired patience of evening. The sounds of family life filter out through the carved stone screen. The old woman turns and goes inside. The gate closes. The alleyway is empty. The lamp behind the carved screen casts a pattern of light and shadow on the stone wall opposite. The same pattern it has cast every evening for 600 years. In the silence, you can hear, from somewhere deep in the necropolis, the distant sound of a child laughing. And then nothing. Just the stones and the night and the long wait of time.